Chapter 49. After watching Yan Shu leave until he disappeared, Yu Qianqiu straightened his slightly bent waist. The flattering expression on his face turned into contemplation. His strength was too weak. Ever since he entered the cultivation world, anyone with a little bit of strength would be able to pinch him. Yet, he still had to act like a tortoise. All of this was because he was too weak. A certain great man said it well. If you fall behind, you'll be beaten. This is really a wise saying. This world was too crazy. The cultivation circle regarded human lives as worthless. His little life could be taken away at any time. The golden bead was a safe place. Did he have to hide in the golden bead for the rest of his life just because it was dangerous? But what about Chu Pinger, who is waiting for me in Ongguangsang? Can I get her out without strength? Even if I get her out, do I have to let her hide with me in the golden pearl forever? No. Even if she's willing, I can't let her hide with me forever. How can I let a woman who treats me sincerely suffer for the rest of her life? Thinking of this, Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly and shook his head. He muttered, as long as I can increase my strength, I don't care if I'm a good person or a bad person. Even if I have to become the enemy of the entire cultivation world, I don't care. Pinger. When I really become notorious, I hope you can understand. Because of you, from today onwards, my conscience will be eaten by dogs. After a firm belief was established in his heart, Yu Qianqiu let out a long breath. It's not that I don't want to be a good person, but I don't have the conditions to be a good person. What's more important than living? There's a saying in my previous life, if you're poor, take care of yourself. If you're rich, take care of the world. After walking around the small courtyard twice, he didn't find anyone here. He guessed that they went out to do something and probably wouldn't come back for a while. Pushing open the room that Yan Shu designated for him, there was almost nothing inside. There was a table, a chair, and a bed. There was nothing else. Since he was bored, he closed the door and disappeared from the room, returning to the golden pearl space. The young cultivator who was hugging a spirit stone and absorbing it was the person he kidnapped from 100 Flower Valley. Yu Qianqiu looked at him and smiled. What's your name? Hearing someone speak, the young cultivator sitting cross-legged slowly opened his eyes. When he saw Yu Qianqiu standing in front of him, his expression immediately changed. He jumped up and shouted, "You thief, let me out." With that, he charged at Yu Qianqiu as if he was going to fight to the death. Yu Qianqiu smiled and shook his head. Within the golden bead world, he was the one in charge. Probably no one could do anything to him. Even the white fox could only stare at him helplessly, let alone this young cultivator with a shallow cultivation. Just as he was about to dodge, the young cultivator who was rushing forward suddenly screamed. He held his head with both hands and fell down, rolling on the ground in pain. Yu Qianqiu was stunned for a moment before he understood what was going on. He had seen this phenomenon on Guanyu before. It was the sign of being controlled by someone after their natal yuan shin was forcefully extracted. In the golden bead space, only the white fox could do this. Closing his eyes to sense the golden bead world, the location of the white fox and Guanyu appeared in his mind. Yu Qianqiu's figure disappeared and reappeared in the white fox's garden. Seeing Guanyu holding a bag and taking out a handful of seeds to sow on the plowed land with the white fox guiding him, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but laugh. Guanyu was really lucky to have such a beauty accompanying him to farm. "Sister, are you planting flowers again?" Yu Qianqiu smiled. The white fox didn't even raise her head. Instead, Guanyu stopped what he was doing and said, "Yo, boss, Yu is here. Did supporting Immortal Island accept you?" The white fox probably didn't like his nagging, so she glared at him. Guanyu smiled embarrassedly and took out the seeds to continue planting his flowers. Then, she looked at Yu Qianqiu and frowned. "You joined supporting Immortal Island again." From her tone, it seemed that she didn't like people who joined other sections. Ha! Yes. Yu Qianqiu originally wanted to ask Guan Yu about supporting Immortal Island, but he heard the unhappiness in the white fox's words. He changed the topic and said, "Sister, you guys go on with your work. I still have something to do." Before the white fox could say anything, he disappeared and reappeared in front of the young cultivator. The young cultivator was sitting on the ground with a pale face. Yu Qianqiu asked again, "What's your name?" The young cultivator replied dispiritedly, "Qin Feng." Yu Qianqiu said with a smile, "Qin Feng, how many spirit stones can you earn by setting up a stall in a day? Look behind you, there are so many spirit stones that you can't use up. Use them however you want. Don't be half dead, get yourself together. Isn't it just having your natal primordial spirit taken away? You will get used to it after a long time. If you don't believe me, you can go to the flower garden over there. There is a guy called Guan Yu there, and his natal primordial spirit was taken away just like you. Look at how comfortable he is now, he has beauties to plant flowers with him every day." Hearing the word beauties, Qin Feng shuddered. He remembered the day he came in. When he was making a fuss, a woman as beautiful as a fairy suddenly appeared. He had never seen such a beautiful woman before, and he couldn't help but be mesmerized. Who knew that the woman would grab his head without saying a word and take away his natal primordial spirit? The pain that came from the soul made people shudder. Seeing that he was still in a daze, Yu Qianqiu touched his nose and said with a smile, "Don't think too much. From the day you came in, you were destined to follow me. There are only benefits to following me. If you have time, improve your family's talisman-making skills. Who knows, I might need it someday. If you need any materials, let me know the next time I come." Sigh. "I'm very busy, so I won't talk anymore. Think about it." After saying that, he disappeared, leaving the absent-minded Qin Feng still sitting on the ground. It was unknown whether he had heard what was said or not. Just as he returned to his room, he heard someone approaching from outside the courtyard. He opened the door and went out. There were 3 young people walking in. When the 3 saw Yu Qianqiu, they were stunned. After looking at each other, one of them opened his mouth and asked, "You are Yu Qianqiu?" "That's right." Yu Qianqiu was a little surprised. He asked, "How does this fellow Taoist know my name? I wonder who these 3 fellow Taoists are." "Ha! So you really are Yu Qianqiu? Your name has spread all over Fuxian Island today. A Fuxian order almost caused a dozen elders to fight. TSK. I heard you are also level 10 Qi refinement and have Elder Guan as your master. I guessed you would also be assigned to our courtyard." "Ha! The 3 of us are also level 10 Qi refinement. My name is Ling Feng." He then introduced the people on his left and right. "This is Bei Zi, and he is Xian Ping. So it's 3 senior brothers." Yu Qianqiu bowed, but in his heart, he was wondering why these 3 people's names felt so weird. Ling Feng laughed brightly. "I don't dare to call you senior brother. Putting aside the fact that you are Elder Guan's disciple, the 3 of us can't see through your cultivation. I'm afraid we will have to call you senior brother." "That's right." Bei Zi on the left agreed. "Normal people don't have the chance to enter our courtyard. Since we are here, we are brothers. Xian Ping, can you share the good wine you've hidden with everyone?" "Okay." Xian Ping said expressionlessly. Yu Qianqiu was slightly startled. He thought that Xian Ping didn't want to take the wine, so he quickly smiled. "No need to trouble Brother Xian. I have wine here. I promise you 3 can drink to your heart's content." As he said this, he reached into his storage pouch. When he was at the pillar of the general's residence, Shi Shaotian gave him a lot of good wine. "Wait!" Xian Ping shouted and coldly said, you are the guest. He then walked towards a room. The meaning behind his words was that you are the guest, and there is no reason for a guest to greet the host. Yu Qianqiu's hand froze. He didn't know what to do. Ling Feng smiled. Brother Yu, don't mind him. Xian Ping always speaks like this. You will know after spending a long time with him that he is cold on the outside but warm on the inside. His words are harsh but he doesn't mean any harm. Yu Qianqiu felt relieved, but Beizi stared at the storage pouch on his waist. She clicked her tongue. Brother Yu actually has a storage pouch. I have been on Fuxian Island for so many years, but I don't think I have seen a qi condensation cultivator with such a thing. This is good. I'm afraid it can't be bought with even a top-grade spirit stone, right? Ling Feng's eyes were filled with envy. Xian Ping, who came out with a big jar of wine, also said, good stuff. Since you like it, I will ask Master Qingjingqing to bring 3 for you the next time I meet him. Yu Qianqiu was often a stingy person, but he was always generous when it came to making friends. Ling Feng and Beizi looked at each other and smiled. They didn't take his words seriously. They both thought that he was just being perfunctory, but they didn't point it out. For qi condensation cultivators, storage pouches weren't something they could casually give away. Yu Qianqiu saw their expressions, but he didn't say anything. Some things didn't need to be explained. Actions were the most convincing. Besides, 3 storage pouches were nothing to him. Xian Ping simply said, drink. Chapter 50. The few of them sat around the stone table. After a few bowls of wine, the atmosphere changed. The 4 of them were less courteous and more straightforward. After some small talk, Yu Qianqiu had a rough understanding of the 3 of them. He could tell that Ling Feng and Beizi were candid and straightforward. They were passionate people, which was rare in the cultivation world. As for Xian Ping, he was a man of few words, but one sentence could make people choke. The 3 of them had good characters. Yu Qianqiu felt that the 3 of them were worth befriending. Besides, it wasn't a bad thing to make a few friends in an unfamiliar place. However, characters were rare in the cultivation world. Moreover, he met 3 of them at once. Yu Qianqiu had to ask in a roundabout way. It turned out that there was no other reason other than the fact that the 3 of them did not know how to conduct themselves. To put it bluntly, it was because the 3 of them did not know how to follow the waves and flatter the people in charge. Thus, the 3 of them were chased together. Usually, they would only do rough and menial work that no one was willing to do. It could also be said that the 3 of them would rather break than bend the knee and cause trouble. Unfortunately, the 3 of them didn't have a good aptitude. They had failed to build their foundation once. If they failed a second time, they would be chased out of Fuxian Island. Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. What was the meaning of him being sent here? Why was he put together with 3 people who had no future? Was Guan Weiwu going to burn the bridge after crossing it? Was he going to ignore him after getting the immortal supporting token? Ling Feng seemed to see through his depression. He drank the wine in his bowl and smiled. You were brought here by Yan Shu. I'm afraid there are some things you don't know. Yan Shu's father was Elder Yan Tuo, who was in charge of the miscellaneous matters of Fuxian Island. When Yan Shu joined the Elixir Refinery Pavilion, he used his father's name to ask Elder Guan to be his master. In the end, Elder Guan didn't give him any face. He rejected him on the spot and gave him a random master. Yan Shu was a narrow-minded person, a real villain. At that time, he was furious, but he couldn't do anything to Elder Guan. Afterwards, when Elder Guan was in his prime, he accepted a few disciples, but without exception, all of them were killed by Yan Shu. Ugh! Yu Qianqiu almost spat out the wine in his mouth. After he managed to swallow it down, he heard Beizi chuckle and say, Brother Yu, are you scared? You are also Elder Guan's disciple. I hope you're the exception. Yu Qianqiu put down his wine bowl and looked at the three of them in astonishment. It can't be that exaggerated, right? Yan Shu killed Elder Guan's future disciple just because Elder Guan didn't accept him as a disciple? It can't be faked. Xian Ping, who was immersed in his wine, concluded. Although he didn't speak much, his words were more useful than Ling Feng and Bei Zi's explanations. Yu Qianqiu completely dispelled the suspicion in his heart. He asked reluctantly, could it be that Elder Guan doesn't even care about his own disciple being killed? Bei Zi chuckled again. Haven't you heard of Elder Guan's nickname, Pill Addict? Other than alchemy, I don't think there's anything else he cares about. He even forgot about the disciple he accepted today the next day. Do you think a master like this can be relied on? Xian Ping, who was pouring wine, shook his head and said, he can't be relied on. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. There was such a muddle-headed master. Why did he have to meet him? He hated himself for being blind. Why did he choose Elder Guan as his master? Damn it! My life is even more bitter than a cabbage. Ling Feng grabbed the wine jar next to Xian Ping and filled Yu Qianqiu's bowl with wine. She said, if it wasn't for his father's prestige and the fact that there are so many nascent soul cultivators, how could a core formation cultivator like Yan Shu be the caretaker of the alchemy pavilion? However, since he sent you to our courtyard, it seems like he does have the intention to harm you. Although that's the case, you don't have to worry too much. The rules of Fuxian Island aren't just for show. He won't dare to harm you openly. As long as you're vigilant, it won't be easy for him to harm you. Yu Qianqiu nodded and didn't say anything. A fierce look flashed through his eyes. No one noticed that he already had the intention to kill Yan Shu. Although he didn't know if the Yan Shu mentioned by the three of them was really so unbearable, if he really had to live in fear every day, then there was no need to think about it. It wasn't the first time he did something like this. However, in order to succeed in building his foundation, he still had to endure it. It was hard to find a sect with such good conditions. Moreover, what he heard was only a one-sided story from the three of them. Some things were better to see with one's own eyes. Thinking about this, Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands and smiled. Thank you three brothers for your reminder. I'll remember it. This is the first time we've met, so let's not talk about this disappointing thing. Everyone says that Fuxian Island is a blessed land. I haven't seen the beautiful scenery here. I wonder if the three brothers can take me there to see it. Xian Ping shook his head. No. Yu Qianqiu was startled. Why? Didn't Yan Shu tell you that disciples under the foundation establishment stage can't wander around without permission? Ling Feng asked curiously. The other two also looked at him. Yu Qianqiu thought that Yan Shu really did tell him such a rule. At that time, he thought that Yan Shu was just scaring a newcomer like him, so he didn't take it to heart. Now, it seemed that it was true. Chapter 51. He thought about how he had never looked at the pill formula in detail. Without a basic understanding of it, he reckoned that he wouldn't be able to fool Guan Weiwu even if he wanted to. With this thought in mind, he couldn't bring himself to drink anymore. Yu Qianqiu raised his head and drained the wine in his bowl. He put down the bowl, stood up, and apologized to the three. I'm not feeling well. I'll go back and rest first. Next time, I'll treat you all to a good drink. With that, he hurriedly turned around and left. The three of them stared at him in shock as he entered his room and closed the door. Ling Feng quietly said, "It looks like he's still taking things too hard." "It's nothing. He'll be able to accept it after some time," Bei Zi said. Xian Ping, who had been drinking silently, turned his head to look at the closed door. He suddenly said, "Not necessarily." Then he continued drinking. Ling Feng and Bei Zi looked at each other, unsure of what he meant by that. The moment Yu Qianqiu closed the door, he immediately disappeared from the room. He urgently wanted to find the white fox, hoping that she could help him remove the restrictions on the Jade Archive. Among the people he knew, the white fox was probably the only one who had that ability. Who else could he look for but her? She was able to set up a formation with just a few spirit stones, so she must have a certain understanding of formations and restrictions. Returning to the Golden Pearl, he used his divine sense to investigate and confirm the white fox's location. With a thought, he appeared outside the white fox's garden in the blink of an eye. There was now another capable assistant in the flower bed. Chen Feng seemed to have thought things through and was busy farming with Guan Yu. Seeing Yu Qianqiu's arrival, the former glanced at him before lowering his head and disappearing. He snorted coldly to express his dissatisfaction, while the latter happily nodded and smiled in greeting. Yu Qianqiu wasn't in the mood to pay attention to the two of them. He affectionately called out to the white fox, "Sister," and walked over. The white fox's peerless beauty, coupled with her white robe, stood among the green leaves and fresh flowers. It was very pleasing to the eye. She frowned slightly and said, "Why are you so diligent today? You haven't even been out for a day, right?" Yu Qianqiu smiled in embarrassment. He naturally couldn't directly say that he had something he needed her help with. However, he was also thick-skinned and could easily flatter her. Who told Big Sister to have a beauty that could captivate even the birds and beasts, a beauty that could outshine the moon and put flowers to shame? I missed Big Sister, so I couldn't wait to see beautiful Big Sister. One had to know that there were no such words of praise in this world that could captivate even the birds and beasts. Suddenly hearing such words from his mouth, the white fox, who knew she was beautiful and was used to being praised by others, could not help but feel her heart flutter and her pretty face blushed. No matter how extraordinary a woman was, who wouldn't want to be the most beautiful woman in the world? Who wouldn't want the nicest words of praise to be used on them? Even immortals were no exception. The heart under her plump chest was beating a little erratically. Looking at this younger brother who always said frivolous words to her, she wanted to get angry but couldn't. She had finally experienced this scoundrel brother of hers. Every time he said words that could make a woman flustered, she really couldn't stand it. Although she knew he wasn't really frivolous, she still had to act angry, otherwise, he would become arrogant. She then asked coldly, "Your words sound nice, but I'm afraid you have something to ask me for help with." This sister really knew him too well. She immediately saw through his intentions. However, when he was free, he really didn't come to see her. Yu Qianqiu was a little embarrassed to open his mouth. His eyes wandered around, pretending not to hear anything as he admired the flowers around him. Yu Qianqiu stared blankly at the flower bed to his side, which had all sorts of flowers in full bloom. If he remembered correctly, the last time he came here, he had clearly seen Guan Yu sowing the seeds. It hadn't even been a day since then, so why were the flowers already so red? How could they grow so fast? Could it be that he remembered wrongly? Yu Qianqiu thought that his memory was pretty good, but he didn't have a photographic memory. But this kind of thing shouldn't be wrong. He looked around the flower bed and then looked at where he was standing. It shouldn't be wrong. When were these flowers planted? Yu Qianqiu pointed at the flower bed beside him and asked suspiciously. The white fox didn't answer his question. Instead, it turned its head to the side proudly and also pretended to admire the flowers. This was something that he learned quickly from his younger brother. Yu Qianqiu looked at Guan Yu, who was smiling and looking at him. The latter waved at him and said, "Boss, do you want to know what's going on? Come here, I'll show you something good." Guan Yu's words clearly showed that he knew what was going on, and he didn't remember wrongly. There was indeed something wrong with this flower bed. Yu Qianqiu nodded and walked over obediently. He asked curiously, "What good thing do you want to see?" Guan Yu smiled and didn't answer. He took out a small bag from the storage bag on his waist and grabbed something from it. He put it in his palm and stretched it over. Yu Qianqiu stretched his head out and stared blankly at the two black dots on Guan Yu's palm for a long time. He then asked uncertainly, "Are they flower seeds?" "Smart. Boss is the boss, you can even see through it." Guan Yu looked at the two black dots on his palm and said, "That's right, they are two flower seeds." F*ck, you dare to trick me. Yu Qianqiu was angry. He rolled up his sleeves and was about to make a move. This Guan Yu was getting more and more impudent. He had schemed against him several times, and seeing that he didn't care about it, he was getting more and more excited. Pfft. The white fox on the side couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh. She seemed to be very happy to see her brother make a fool of himself. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He turned his head and couldn't help but be stunned. This was the first time he saw the white fox smile like this. Under her smile, all the flowers around her paled in comparison. He finally understood why the ancients in his previous life would describe beauties as being able to outshine the moon and put the flowers to shame. No matter how beautiful the flowers were, how could they be more beautiful than the beauty in front of him? Guan Yu and Chen Feng were also stunned. They had never seen the white fox like this. The white fox clearly realized that she had lost her composure. Her pretty face instantly darkened, and she glared at the three of them coldly. The three of them shuddered at the same time and woke up. "Hey! Big sister! You really are a seductress who can charm people to death." Yu Qianqiu groaned helplessly in his heart. He looked at Guan Yu and said, "Forget it. Since you were able to make my big sister smile, I won't argue with you today." "Why are you arguing?" "I said I would show you something good. Do you think I would lie to you?" Guan Yu said tit for tat. He then held the seeds in his hand and said, "Look carefully." After saying that, he squatted down and dug out two small holes in the soft soil that had been loosened. He picked up the two seeds in his hand and put them in the two holes. Yu Qianqiu, who was considered a farmer in his previous life, was naturally no stranger to farming. Although he had never grown flowers, he had grown vegetables before. He stared at Guan Yu's actions with his eyes wide open. He wanted to know the difference between growing flowers and vegetables. If there was no difference, how could the flowers grow so fast? After putting the seeds, Guan Yu reached out and untied a small bamboo tube from his waist. He gently pulled out the wooden stopper and took out a small wooden spoon from his belt. He reached into the bamboo tube and slowly scooped out a spoonful of something. The thing that he scooped out was purple. Yu Qianqiu thought it was familiar. He seemed to have seen it somewhere before. Chapter 52. Pouring a spoonful of the purple substance into the small pit where the seed was placed, Guan Yu quickly moved the soft soil around the small pit into the pit. Shortly after, he scooped out some water from the bucket beside him and poured it over the soil. Yu Qianqiu watched as he completed a series of actions, then stared at the small pit. Not long after, a crack appeared on the surface of the soil where the water had seeped into, followed by a few more. Suddenly, the center of the intersecting cracks arched slightly and broke open, revealing a conspicuous whitish-green dot. If one did not pay attention, they might not notice it. Soon, the green bean dot swayed slightly and gradually stretched out, revealing the figure of a small green sprout. Yu Qianqiu sucked in a breath of cold air, his eyes wide and tongue-tied. Is that the seed germinating? How is this possible? He then looked at Guan Yu and cried out in surprise, "How did you do it?" Guan Yu smiled and gestured at Lu Ye with his lips, indicating for him to continue watching. The small green sprout burst forth with vitality, its branches and leaves curled up and wriggled in all directions, expanding and growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. The tender leaves continued to multiply, branching out in all directions. The main trunk stopped growing when it reached a person's thigh, gradually turning from translucent green to brownish red. The entire plant seemed to have solidified, stopping there without any movement. If not for the shocking growth process, no one would be able to tell the difference between this plant and other plants. Was that it? Yu Qianqiu retracted his thoughts and let out a breath. Suddenly, the plant moved again, its branches and leaves swaying, attracting his attention again. The plant's silence seemed to be brewing something. Its branches were trembling, and the joints of the leaves and stems had bulges the size of beans. This was the case in many other places. When it reached the size of a broad bean, flower buds could be clearly seen. Then, as if something was trying to break free from its restraints, the flower bud struggled to break free. Bright colors began to bloom, expand, take shape, and solidify. Fresh flowers appeared in front of them, their petals bright and fresh, their stamens pitiful. After a long time, when there was no movement, the people standing at the side could smell a faint fragrance. Just like that, a plant with dozens of flowers blooming on its branches stood in front of him. From sowing, irrigating, germinating, growing, branching, budding, and blooming, it was only the time it took to brew a cup of tea. It was really incredible. Yu Qianqiu, who had been holding his breath for a long time, slowly turned his head and looked at the bamboo tube in Guan Yu's hand. Apart from the purple substance, he did not notice anything unusual during the planting process. Chapter 53. Guan Yu saw the seriousness in his words and knew what he wanted to do, so he did as he was told. A moment later, a flower bloomed in front of them. Yu Qianqiu didn't say anything. Before the flowers withered, he quickly plucked a flower. He pinched the flower's stem and quickly rubbed it against the other flowers. Soon, the stamen of the flower in his hand had intimate contact with the other stamens. Guan Yu didn't know what he was doing. Chen Feng stopped what he was doing. Even the white fox looked at Yu Qianqiu. The three of them looked at the flower with curiosity. Suddenly, Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, "That's right. It should be like this." What happened next surprised the three of them. The flower that they thought would wither did not wither immediately. Instead, there was an additional procedure. The center of the petals began to bear fruits. After the fruits gradually took shape, the petals began to wither. After Yu Qianqiu did something to it, the plant didn't wilt. Instead, the wilting process turned into blooming. The three of them looked at Yu Qianqiu in disbelief. Guan Yu mumbled, "How is this possible?" Although the question he raised could not be considered as deliberately making things difficult for Big Boss Yu, it was still a little provocative. However, he never expected that Big Boss Yu would be able to solve the problem that even White Fox could not solve with just a wave of his hand. The peerless White Fox gracefully walked to the front of the fruit-bearing plant. Her slender jade-like fingers plucked one of the fruits. After her fingernails pinched it open, there were black seeds lying inside. She picked it up and placed it in front of her jade-like nose to sniff it. Her face was full of surprise. Chen Feng's resentful eyes were now looking at Yu Qianqiu with a hint of respect. Actually, to Yu Qianqiu, this was common sense in his previous world. This was because there were no insects or bees to pollinate the flowers. These plants could only bloom but not bear fruit. If they didn't bear fruit, they wouldn't have any seeds. In his previous world, even elementary school students would know about this. Now that he was doing it, it was a little shocking. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but feel embarrassed when he saw the three of them looking at him with stars of worship in their eyes. He chuckled and said, "Don't worship me. I'm just a legend. Look at you. Tell me what's going on." The white fox held the peeled fruit in her hand and shouted. Yu Qianqiu laughed and rubbed his nose. "Sister. It's a long story. It involves botany and biology. It's a huge systematic subject. I'm afraid you won't understand." At this point, he saw that the three of them had a look of curiosity in their eyes. His expression also became serious as he said, "I'm afraid that you won't understand if I explain it in a complicated way. I'll explain it in a simpler way. Everything in the world was divided into yin and yang. If there was a sky, there would be an earth. Just like if there was a sun in the sky, there would also be a moon. If there is light, there will be darkness. Everything in the world is also divided into yin and yang, which is what we call male and female." I've already said it very simply. I don't know if it's too complicated. Do you understand? The three of them nodded to show that they understood. That's good. Then I'll continue. Listen carefully. Yu Qianqiu made a fist and coughed. He continued, "Everything in the world is divided into yin and yang, male and female. It should be easy for you to understand. Whether it's humans, pigs, dogs, cows, or sheep, they are all divided into male and female. A man alone can't give birth to a child. Similarly, a woman alone can't give birth to a child. Therefore, there needs to be a union between a man and a woman. No matter if it's 2 legs or 4 legs, it's the same. I call these things that can move and walk zoology. Above zoology is biology. Biology refers to all living things in the world. Living things include plants. The so-called plants are what I'm going to talk about next. This is botany. Let me ask you one more time. Do you understand?" The three of them nodded again. They originally had a little bit of doubt in their hearts, but it was dispelled by his well-founded words. The atmosphere of learning was very strong. Yu Qianqiu was very satisfied with this effect. He pretended to say again, "What are plants?" Flowers, trees, fruits, and vegetables that we usually eat belong to the category of plants. This includes the flowers and plants that the three of you are planting. They can grow naturally. Of course, this involves a higher level of natural science. You won't understand even if I explain it, so I won't say it. These flowers and plants can grow naturally. They are also living things. Therefore, they are also within the scope of biology. Don't underestimate these flowers and plants. They are the same as the animals in zoology that we talked about earlier. They also have yin and yang, and they also need to be combined. Guan Yu asked me why these plants only bloom but not bear fruit. Now, I'll explain it to you in detail. I've talked too much. I'm very thirsty. Is there any water here? Yes. Chen Feng replied as he scooped up a ladle of water from a nearby bucket and respectfully brought it to Yu Qianqiu. There was no trace of resentment on Yu Qianqiu's face. Yu Qianqiu drank the water and returned the ladle to him. He said, "Thank you." He then continued, "Why do the flowers that you plant only bloom but not bear fruit? Everyone, look." He pointed to a plant that was full of flowers and said, "There are many flowers blooming here. Don't they all look the same?" Yes, they all look the same, but they are not. These flowers are also divided into yin and yang. If they want to bear fruit and produce seeds, just like humans, they also need to combine yin and yang. However, they can't combine like humans. Therefore, they need external help. Just like what I did just now, it's also one of the ways to help them combine. Hearing this, Guan Yu was puzzled. That can't be right. The flowers and plants in the outside world haven't been helped by humans to combine, but they still bloom and produce seeds. Chen Feng and the white fox also looked at him suspiciously. Obviously, they agreed with what Guan Yu said. That's a very good question. It involves entomology and zoology. Yu Qianqiu expressed his praise and said, "Of course, the flowers and plants outside are not helped by humans. They are other animals, which are the insects in animals." What are insects? All of you should have seen butterflies, bees, and other insects, right? If you have observed carefully, you will find that insects like bees like to hover on all kinds of blooming flowers. After they get pollen on the flowers, when they land on another flower, they naturally help the flowers to complete a union. The bees are the medium between them, so the plants outside can bloom, bear fruit, and reproduce. If you don't believe me, I can bring some bees in from the outside next time. Then, you will know if what I said is true. After his explanation, the three of them suddenly understood. Everyone had seen the habits of bees and butterflies. Thinking about it carefully, it seemed to be the case. Although they didn't have a direct impression, the three of them basically believed what he said was true. Sigh. I didn't expect a half-baked person like me to be able to make such a big noise here. I actually have the talent to be a teacher. It's really rare. Yu Qianqiu held back the pride in his heart and didn't show it. He said with a smile, at this point, everyone should know what is going on. There is no need to say more complicated things. Let's stop here. Chapter 54. They had heard it all. The three of them had complicated looks in their eyes. They had not expected Yu Qianqiu to be so knowledgeable. Zoology, botany, natural science, and entomology were all unheard of. Their horizons had been broadened today. Young Chen Feng's eyes were filled with admiration, while Guan Yu looked slightly ashamed. Yu Qianqiu seemed to see a strange light in the white fox's eyes, which made his heart beat faster. Yu Qianqiu remembered why he had come, and said nervously, "Sister, there's something I need your help with." The white fox glanced at him with her bright eyes and softly replied, Seeing that his sister had agreed, Yu Qianqiu was overjoyed. He hurriedly took out the pill recipe jade archive and handed it over, saying, "I know your skills are extraordinary, sister. There's something recorded in this jade archive that I would like to take a look at, but someone has placed heavy restrictions on it. I'll have to trouble sister to help me open it." Guan Yu and Chen Feng did not care about what they were talking about. The two of them ran to an empty space to examine the botany that Yu Qianqiu had mentioned. The white fox took the pill recipe jade archive and examined it. Her brows furrowed slightly. Yu Qianqiu asked nervously, "Sister, is it impossible to remove?" The white fox shook her head lightly, and said, "The person who set up the restrictions has a very high level of attainment and formations. There are a total of 7 layers of restrictions. The first layer has already been broken, and the first few layers are not difficult for me. However, the last few layers are ones that I have never seen before. I'm afraid it will take some time to break them. Otherwise, forcefully breaking them will damage the items inside." As she finished speaking, her slender fingers began to move on the jade archive. Yu Qianqiu knew that she was breaking the restrictions, but he could not understand what she was doing. He felt that it was extremely mysterious. After 3 rays of white light flashed on the jade archive, the white fox's fingers stopped moving. After a long while, she exhaled and returned the jade archive, saying, "I've broken 3 of the remaining 6 layers of restrictions. I can't break the remaining 3 for now. I've memorized them, but I need some time to think about them." Yu Qianqiu took the jade archive and smiled sheepishly. "Breaking through 3 layers is enough. Don't worry about the rest. Sister can think about it slowly." The white fox nodded and stared at him without saying anything else. It turned around and walked toward the bamboo house outside the garden. On the other side, Guan Yu and Chen Feng exclaimed in amazement. Apparently, the results of the experiment were miraculous. Yu Qianqiu put away the jade archive and walked over with a smile on his face. When he saw Chen Feng, he suddenly thought of someone else. Not only were the names and medicinal effects of the various spiritual plants described in detail, but even the shapes and appearances of the herbs were vividly displayed before his eyes. The level of detail was enough to make one's hair stand on end. Even the growth habits of each herb and the places where it was easy to collect them were listed. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. It wasn't just a normal shock, but a very, very shock. Even though he knew nothing about medicinal herbs or pill refining, he now knew that he had picked up a treasure. He was glad that he had made a wise decision to obtain this item from Lu Jingguang. If he had given up on such a good item, he would be worse than a pig or a dog. Aside from his shock, he couldn't help but think back to the alchemy sect of yesteryear. A sect that was founded on pills had an unparalleled level of attainment in the field of alchemy. Just by looking at the countless number of medicinal herbs recorded in detail in the second layer, one could tell how much blood, sweat, and tears of many generations had been spent to gather them. Just this layer alone was enough to make it a rare treasure of the world. If someone wanted to rebuild the alchemy sect, he believed that with this jade archive of pill recipes, there wouldn't be any technical obstacles. It was impossible to memorize so many medicinal herbs in a short amount of time. He could only leave them for later. Sighing, Yu Qianqiu's divine sense entered the third layer. From the opening words of this layer, he could tell that it recorded various pill recipes suitable for use by foundation-building cultivators. Beside the name of each pill recipe was written the effects of the pill. Below it was a list of the required medicinal herbs. Even the order and timing of the medicinal herbs to be used in the concoction, and the age of the medicinal herbs were written down in detail. There were also various problems that would occur before the concoction of the pill was completed. TSK. This was really good stuff. Even if a layman came across this item, as long as he followed the instructions, he would be able to concoct a miraculous medicinal pill. He didn't expect that a mere foundation-building cultivator would be able to use so many medicinal pills to aid their cultivation. This was really strange. Since the alchemy sect was able to concoct so many miraculous medicinal pills to raise their cultivation, then their strength shouldn't be weak. How could they have been exterminated by someone? As Yu Qianqiu was reading, his eyelids suddenly twitched. The three words, foundation-building pill, appeared before his eyes, immediately attracting his attention. I don't know if I should say that it's good that they're upright, or that they're pedantic. No wonder they're not tolerated by others. I wanted to make friends with them, but it seems like it's not enough. Forget it, I'll wait and see. He followed the three of them to the great hall of the alchemy pavilion. Many disciples were bustling about. Yan Shu was already waiting for them outside the hall. When he saw the four of them, he took out 4 jade archives and handed them to them. He said coldly, "This is your mission for today. Those who fail to complete it will be severely punished." Seeing that Ling Feng and the others had released their divine sense to examine the jade archives, Yu Qianqiu was about to do the same. Suddenly, he saw 3 people walking out of the great hall. He knew all 3 of them. The ones walking in front were Guan Weiwu and Elder Fei of Wanfen Garden. The 2 of them were talking as they walked. Behind them was a beautiful woman. Yu Qianqiu had met her once before. She was the woman he had met in the shop on Fuxian Island in the 100 Flowers Valley. He remembered that there was a man with this woman. The 2 of them looked very similar. He guessed that they were either brother or sister. The 2 of them addressed Elder Qin as senior uncle. Obviously, they didn't use the messy form of address on Fuxian Island. The shopkeeper in the shop addressed them as young Palace Master and young Mississippi. It seemed like this girl had a powerful background. When they walked to the side of the few people outside the hall, Elder Guan, who had always been domineering, actually said to Elder Fei politely, "Please." Elder Fei smiled bitterly and said, "Just don't push my Wanfen Garden too hard in the future." The arrival of the 2 alarmed the crowd. One after another, they greeted, "Elder Guan, Elder Fei." Only Yu Qianqiu called out, "Greetings, Master." It was unusually ear-piercing and attracted the attention of the crowd. When Guan Weiwu saw that it was Yu Qianqiu, he happily nodded at him. Clearly, it wasn't as Ling Feng and the others had said, that this muddle-headed master would forget who his disciple was. When Elder Fei saw that it was Yu Qianqiu, his face twitched slightly, as if he had recalled some unpleasant memories. Then, he rolled his eyes and stared at Yu Qianqiu, enunciating each word clearly. So it's Yu Qianqiu. There was something wrong with this old fellow. Could it be that he was still brooding over the immortal supporting token? Yu Qianqiu suddenly felt that something was wrong. Thinking that this was the alchemy pavilion, he couldn't do anything to him, so he greeted, "Greetings, Elder Fei. You are Yu Qianqiu?" The woman behind the two elders suddenly asked and then stopped talking. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. How did she know me? It seemed like I was very famous on Fuxian Island. Elder Guan looked at the woman strangely and asked, "You knew him before?" Chapter 56. His words were too vehement, and his voice was loud enough that everyone outside the grand hall could hear him. In an instant, the entire hall fell into a frightening silence. Everyone turned to look at him, and almost everyone was dumbfounded. Ling Feng and the other two, who were initially mocking Yu Qianqiu for sucking up to him, had their mouths wide open in disbelief. Elder Guan and Elder Fei were also a little dumbfounded. On the other hand, the young woman didn't understand the gravity of the situation, and was a little flabbergasted by everyone's expressions. Yan Shu's face was green and red at the same time. His eyes were protruding out of their sockets, and he pointed at Yu Qianqiu with a trembling arm. It seemed that he was extremely angry. Guan Weiwu, who was standing at the side, shouted, "Enough." Then, he looked at Yu Qianqiu and said in an irrefutable tone, "It's decided then. You will follow Elder Fei to the Myriad Fragrance Garden to help out." Seeing that the outcome had been decided and that there was nothing he could do to change it, Yu Qianqiu silently nodded. "Then, let's go." Elder Fei smiled as she crossed her arms in front of her stomach. She then led the way down the mountain, and the young woman followed closely behind. Yu Qianqiu passed the jade archive in his hand to Ling Feng, then bowed to Guan Weiwu and said, "Take care, master." Then, he left the mountain. Everyone watched his silhouette as he descended the mountain. Only Yan Shu's eyes were filled with resentment. At the same time, there were quite a few people who were looking at Yan Shu with gloating expressions. It seemed that he wasn't that popular after all. Elder Fei leisurely walked down the mountain, while the young and beautiful woman followed suit. Yu Qianqiu lagged behind the two of them by about a dozen meters. If this had happened in the past, he would have followed closely behind the young woman as well. Even if he didn't get intimate with her, it would still be a pleasure to follow behind a beautiful woman and watch her swaying her buttocks. Of course, the premise was that Chu Ping'er and the White Fox didn't know about it, and he wasn't in a bad mood. He was indeed in a terrible mood. He had just seen a glimmer of a bright future from the pill formula Jade archive when he unexpectedly bumped into Elder Fei. Elder Fei must not have had any good intentions in dragging him to the Myriad Fragrance Garden. From what he knew, most cultivators were at the level of beasts, especially the old ones. Each of them had either lived for more than 100 years or 200 to 300 years. Their humanity had long been eaten by dogs, and they acted according to their own whims. How dangerous! Elder Fei Dinan stopped his footsteps and turned his head to look at the dejected Yu Qianqiu. With a slight smile, he shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, come here." Then, he continued to walk down the mountain. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He had no choice but to lower his head when he was under someone else's roof. He was following him now. Without saying a word, he eagerly ran to Elder Fei's side and said with a flattering smile, "Elder Fei, what instructions do you have for me? If there is anything, just tell me. I, Yu Qianqiu, will not hesitate to climb a mountain of swords or plunge into a sea of flames." Ah! Looking at Yu Qianqiu's despicable face, Ferdinand was greatly astonished. The words that were just about to come out of his mouth could not come out. To be honest, when Ferdinand saw Yu Qianqiu, he was indeed a little unhappy in his heart. However, he did not have any intention of harming him. However, he still had the intention of teasing and fooling around with him. Hence, he suddenly thought of asking for him. Just now, when he suddenly saw Yu Qianqiu on the mountain, he could not help but look at Yu Qianqiu in a new light. Nowadays, there were really fewer and fewer young people like him. He no longer had the intention of fooling around with him. Instead, he began to care for him. However, this despicable face of Yu Qianqiu and his fearless attitude just now were worlds apart. It was very unappetizing. Ferdinand immediately snorted coldly and said, "Nothing, I just want you to hurry up and follow me." The worse his tone was, the more Yu Qianqiu nodded and bowed, saying, "Yes." Yu Qianqiu was also not willing to follow beside Ferdinand and watch his face. He could not help but find a reason to take a few steps back. He pretended to greet the beauty on the side and said with a smile, "I am Yu Qianqiu, Qi Refining Level 10. May I know how I should address you?" The woman also smiled and replied to him, "Yan Zixia, Foundation Establishment Early Stage. I just entered supporting Immortal Island today and am under Elder Fei of Myriad Fragrance Garden. Nice to meet you, nice to meet you. So it is Senior Master Yan." Yu Qianqiu bowed and said. The woman nodded and looked at Yu Qianqiu from head to toe. She also felt strange in her heart. This person is like a completely different person from just now. Myriad Fragrance Garden occupied the largest area among all the branches of supporting Immortal Island. It was also the place with the most abundant spiritual qi. There was no other reason for this. Spiritual qi was needed to grow spiritual grasses. Of course, the land was also indispensable. Otherwise, how could it supply such a large sect? At the same time, Myriad Fragrance Garden was also the place with the most female disciples in the entire supporting Immortal Island. Almost 99% of the female disciples were in Myriad Fragrance Garden. There were probably close to 1,000 of them. Of course, there was a reason for this. Spiritual grasses were different from ordinary herbs. They needed to be carefully cared for. Women were naturally more meticulous than men. They were the best candidates to take care of these flowers and plants. It was also not a very strenuous work. The strenuous work was done by the minority of male disciples. Yu Qianqiu had not been here for long. He did not have the time to understand or listen to others. Thus, he did not know about these things. When he stepped into Myriad Fragrance Garden, which was filled with spiritual qi, fresh air, and fragrant air, his eyes were filled with light and graceful figures. There were beautiful women coming and going everywhere. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his eyes. He thought that it was an illusion of some formation. He immediately followed behind Ferdinand. He was afraid that he would go to the wrong place and be trapped by the formation. He did not expect Elder Fei to rescue him in time if he was trapped. When he heard that this group of thin and plump girls respectfully saluted and called Elder Fei when they saw Ferdinand, and that Ferdinand nodded in return, Yu Qianqiu was a little dumbfounded. This was not an illusion. It was real. Myriad Fragrance Garden actually raised so many female disciples. Moreover, all of them were not bad. Damn! Is this Myriad Fragrance Garden or Myriad Flower House? Yu Qianqiu was very shocked. If it was not for this extraordinary environment, he would really suspect that he had come to a brothel. He was immediately overwhelmed. It would be a waste not to look. Ferdinand led the two of them to the main hall of Myriad Fragrance Garden. He called someone over and said a few words. Then, he brought Yan Zixia away to make arrangements. Yu Qianqiu was still a little dazzled and did not come back to his senses. Ferdinand, who was sitting high in the main hall, stroked his beard and smiled. He had already made arrangements for him. He lightly shouted, "Come." At the same time, he also woke up Yu Qianqiu. A female disciple outside the door hurriedly walked over and saluted, "Elder." Elder Fei pointed at Yu Qianqiu and said, "This is the disciple I borrowed from the alchemy pavilion to help." His name is Yu Qianqiu. Bring him to Ma Jiugu. Tell Ma Jiugu that the matter of raising spirit grass in Myriad Fragrance Garden will be handed over to Yu Qianqiu. A surprised look flashed on the female disciple's face. She saluted and said, "Disciple understands. What kind of work is raising spirit grass?" As Yu Qianqiu was secretly muttering, he heard Ferdinand ask, "Yu Qianqiu, do you have any dissatisfaction with this elder's arrangement for you?" No, disciple resolutely obeys Elder Fei's arrangement. Yu Qianqiu smiled respectfully. That's good. Ferdinand waved his hand and said, "Bring him away." Yes. The female disciple respectfully retreated. Yu Qianqiu vaguely felt that something was wrong. It was not good for him to say anything more. He could only follow the female disciple obediently. Chapter 57. Along the way, Yu Qianqiu was still wondering what the spirit-nurturing grass was for. And who was that Ma Jiugu? She must be someone extraordinary for Elder Fei, who was in charge of Myriad Fragrance Garden, to call her aunt. Thinking about this, he felt slightly nervous. The female disciple who led the way at the side sized Yu Qianqiu up from time to time. Naturally, it wasn't because she had taken a fancy to him. With his ordinary appearance that was at the bottom of the pile of ordinary people, there were probably very few people that would take a fancy to him. She was also wondering who this person was. Elder Fei personally borrowed him from the alchemy pavilion. Why did he make him do the work of nurturing the spirit herbs? The female disciple suddenly recalled a rumor a few days ago. There was an itinerant cultivator who entered supporting Immortal Island with an immortal supporting medallion. He was the disciple of Alchemy Pavilion's Elder Guan. It was said that dozens of elders fought fiercely for the immortal supporting medallion. In the end, it was Elder Guan who obtained the immortal supporting medallion. That itinerant cultivator's name was Yu Qianqiu. Could it be this person? Thinking about this, the doubts in her heart were easily resolved. When she looked at Yu Qianqiu again, a trace of pity appeared in her eyes. Yu Qianqiu felt gloomy. He looked at the scenery of Myriad Fragrance Garden to relieve his worries. There were all kinds of spirit herbs planted all around the garden. Smelling the refreshing fragrance, there were many beauties working in the garden. There were all kinds of terrains in the Wanfen garden. There were high hills, low depressions, and flat lands, and all kinds of spiritual herbs were planted everywhere. There were also many flowers and fruits. The colorful spiritual herbs swayed in the breeze. Occasionally, when the wind was strong, the hem of a skirt would be blown up and a delicate hand would be pressed down. It made one's imagination run wild. What a great place! It turned out that spiritual herbs and beauties were also a pretty good scenery. Yu Qianqiu's worries eased a lot. At the same time, he couldn't help but admire the eyesight of the major sects in the cultivation world when it came to accepting disciples. Not all of the female disciples were outstanding beauties, but because they all cultivated their bones, their appearances were much better than ordinary mortals. Of course, not everyone with a good bone structure had a good appearance. There were some people who were ugly but talented, but they were in the minority. All in all, as far as the eye could see, the spiritual herbs were all pretty girls. There were also women who were in their prime and were slightly more mature and alluring. Yu Qianqiu was a little absent-minded as he wondered if he had arrived at Womanland. They arrived at the foot of a mountain. It wasn't really a mountain, but it was at most a slightly higher hill. However, it occupied quite a large area. There were very few trees around the hill, and most of them were covered by various kinds of spirit herbs. The entire hilltop was occupied by an antique courtyard. It was obvious that it was a building that had existed for a long time. Although Yu Qianqiu's cultivation level was not high, along the way, he noticed that the spiritual energy nurtured by this mountain was the most abundant. The spiritual energy had already condensed into a faint mist. The female disciple stopped and reminded him, Yu Qianqiu, this hilltop is the residence of consecrated Aunt Jo. Consecrated Aunt Jo doesn't like noise, so don't make too much noise later. Yu Qianqiu thought that she was reminding him out of kindness, but from the faint fear on her face, he could see that she was afraid that he would implicate her. The two of them were not familiar with each other, let alone a woman, so he didn't mind. He looked at the building on the hilltop and asked, Is consecrated Aunt Jo the Ma Jo that Elder Fei mentioned? Lower your voice. The female disciple seemed to be startled by his words. Ma Jogu is not someone we can call, she said in a soft voice. Elder Fei only calls her that in front of us, but he would never dare to call her that in front of Reverend Jogu. Consecrated Aunt Jo used to be the aunt of the former sect leader, and also the previous elder who presided over Wanfen Garden. Her cultivation level has reached the late stage of passing calamity, and even the current sect leader has to greet her and call her Aunt Jo. Yu Qianqiu replied with an "oh" and looked at the hilltop. He thought, so it's Ferdinand who wants to save face. But why did he send me to the old monster's place? Does he want to use the old monster to kill me? He wondered who would be stronger in a fight between the old monster and his sister. Both of them were in the late stage of passing calamity. Let's go. The female disciple said. Yu Qianqiu nodded. He had originally wanted to get close to her and ask her what her name was, but seeing how timid she was and how she could barely be considered a beauty, he gave up on that thought. Going up the bluestone stairs to the hilltop and standing outside the wall, Yu Qianqiu found that the courtyard was really big and the wall was really high. The tall courtyard gate was open, and there was no one guarding the gate. He raised his head and looked at the three big words, Mulberry Garden, engraved on the top of the courtyard gate. Then, he followed the respectful female disciple and quietly walked in. As soon as he entered, for some reason, Yu Qianqiu suddenly felt that the surrounding temperature dropped a lot. The inside of the wall and the outside seemed to be two different worlds. Walking through the dark courtyard surrounded by trees and green vines, his eyes suddenly opened up. There were all kinds of strange flowers and plants. There were actually many gardens inside, and they were also planted with spirit herbs. In each garden, there were one or two young girls working. Fortunately, the appearance of the young girls here seemed to be a grade higher than what he saw outside. A beautiful and dignified woman greeted the two of them with a smile. The female disciple hurriedly bowed and said, Elder Lon. This made Yu Qianqiu also bow. That Elder Lon smiled and said, What brings you here? The female disciple pointed at Yu Qianqiu and replied, This person is a disciple that Elder Fei borrowed from the alchemy pavilion. His name is Yu Qianqiu. Elder Fei said that he will be sent to Jiu to worship the spirit herb. Yu Qianqiu. Spirit herb. Elder Lon was stunned. Her eyes paused on Yu Qianqiu and then she frowned and said, What the hell is Fei Dinan doing? All right, leave him to me. You can go back. Yes. The female disciple obeyed and left. After listening to their conversation, Yu Qianqiu only felt uncomfortable and secretly cursed in his heart, Damn. Since when did I become a thing that can be sent here and there? You come with me. Elder Lon smiled. Yes. Yu Qianqiu obeyed the order and followed her. As they passed through several spirit herb gardens, Yu Qianqiu thought to himself that the spirit herbs planted here were definitely more precious than those planted outside. He couldn't help but look around, and to his surprise, he discovered that he had seen many of the spirit herbs in the pill recipe jade archive. He followed the woman to a courtyard. Once he entered the courtyard, he suddenly felt that the temperature had dropped a lot. He saw a well in front of him. When he walked past the well, he felt even more bone-chilling cold. Yu Qianqiu shivered from the cold. Although his cultivation level wasn't high, it was not a problem for him to be impervious to heat and cold. He didn't expect this small well to be so powerful. It was as if the temperature of the entire mountaintop was low because of this well. He couldn't help but glance at the well. The water wasn't deep, and he could see it by tilting his head. Strangely, even though the temperature was so low, the well water didn't freeze. It gave the courtyard an even greater sense of mystery. In the courtyard, a white-haired old woman was holding a young and beautiful girl's hand as she spoke. When Yu Qianqiu saw the girl, he was stunned. It was Yan Zixia, whom he had parted ways with not too long ago. Why was she here? He felt strange. When he got closer, he realized that the old woman's face was full of pockmarks. He couldn't help but think of the Ma Jiugu that Elder Fei had mentioned. The old woman turned her head and swept a glance at Yu Qianqiu. Her calm gaze actually made the latter's heart palpitate. She opened her mouth and spoke in an aged voice, "Little Lan, who did you bring here?" Yan Zixia was obviously curious as to why Yu Qianqiu would be here. The two of them nodded at each other. Chapter 58. Hearing the old lady's question, Elder Lan pouted like a little girl and muttered, "Ferdinand sent someone to deliver it to you. He said it's for you to grow spirit herbs." It's simply nonsense. Elder Lan's words proved that the old lady in front of them was Ma Jiugu, but looking at the way she spoke, she was full of worry and disgust. She didn't look like the beautiful and dignified woman from before. Thinking that most of the elders in Fuxian Island were over 200 years old, a woman over 200 years old acting like a spoiled little girl, it made people shudder. He quickly stepped forward and saluted. "Yu Qianqiu greets Elder Jiugu." "Yu Qianqiu." Ma Jiugu seemed to have heard of his name and was stunned. "You're the individual cultivator Yu Qianqiu who joined Fuxian Island with the immortal supporting token." "Yes, I am. Didn't I hear that Guan Weiwu accepted you as his disciple? Why did Ferdinand send you here? Are you Qi refining level 10? Strange, I can't see through your cultivation." Elder Lan said angrily, "It must be because of the immortal supporting token. The dignified elder in charge of Wanfan Garden is actually so narrow-minded. How could she do such a thing? Elder Jiugu, you don't even care." Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. Perhaps there was hope of returning to the alchemy pavilion. Damn! If he knew this would happen, he wouldn't have made things so awkward with Yan Shu. Impulsiveness was the devil. Is that so? Ma Jiugu expressed doubt and laughed. "Ferdinand is your man. If you want to care, you do it." "I won't care." Then, he changed the topic and said cautiously, "However, he is the elder in charge of the 10,000 Fragrance Garden now. Regardless of the seniority of anyone in the 10,000 Fragrance Garden, Ferdinand's words are the law. I have to obey this rule. Lan Las, do as Ferdinand says and take him away." Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu's little thoughts that just jumped out sank again. Yes. Elder Lan felt very wronged. Behind her, there was another person who felt even more wronged than her. Of course, it was Yu Qianqiu. When he walked out of the courtyard, he vaguely heard Yan Zixia's voice. She seemed to be calling someone great-grandmother. Was it Ma Jiugu? In the blink of an eye, Elder Lan turned back into that beautiful and dignified woman. She went outside and threw Yu Qianqiu to a female disciple named Furong. After giving a few instructions, she left. Yu Qianqiu was depressed. This was the first time in his previous life and this life that he had been sold out so many times in one day. Although he was depressed, this big sister Furong was really unbearable. She looked so thin that she couldn't even withstand a gust of wind. Half of her face was covered by a scar. If one looked at the other half of her face and looked at her figure from the back, she would feel like Zhao Fian who fought against Yang Guifei. She was thin and fat. She was a thin beauty, but one couldn't look at her from the front. Otherwise, it would scare people. The clothes she was wearing were a lot older than the clothes of the other Fuxian Island disciples. There were even patches on her shoulders and a small cloth bag was hanging diagonally on her body. Strange. When Furong saw his gaze, she was actually a little evasive. She seemed a little timid. After joining the cultivation world for so long, this was the first time he saw someone afraid of him. He immediately came to his senses. This girl with half a face either had low self-esteem or was a vicious person pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. Yu Qianqiu bowed and said, "I am Yu Qianqiu, Qi Refinement Level 10. Greetings, big sister." Ah. Half a face Furong was a little flustered. She hurriedly bowed and said, "Fu." Furong, Foundation Establishment Late Stage. Greetings, Mr. Yu. Foundation Establishment Late Stage and you still call me Mr.? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He bowed and said, I don't dare. So it's Martial Uncle. Furong was a little uneasy from being called that. She said timidly, Elder Lon told me to hand over the matter of raising spirit herbs in the mulberry grass garden to you. Come with me. After saying that, she turned around and left in a hurry. This back view. It's a pity that face. Yu Qianqiu shook his head regretfully. Outside a small room filled with junk, there were 2 buckets, a shoulder pole, and a long ladle. These were the 3 things that Furong gave him. Yu Qianqiu looked at Furong, who was standing at the side as if she had done something wrong. He then looked at the 3 things suspiciously. These 3 things were very familiar. It was a very familiar combination. However, he couldn't remember where he had seen them before. Martial Uncle Furong, are these for me? What are they for? Yu Qianqiu frowned and asked. Spirit raising grass. Furong's voice was almost inaudible. Oh. Yu Qianqiu smiled embarrassedly and said, hee. Martial Uncle, I just entered the sect not long ago. This, hee. I really don't know what this spirit raising grass is for. Please enlighten me, Martial Uncle. Then come with me. Furong said in a low voice. She reached out her hand to take the 3 spirit raising grass. Yu Qianqiu hurriedly stopped her and said, let me do it. No need to trouble Martial Uncle. He could now see that this disfigured young Martial Uncle was really timid and shy. However, it didn't mean that he didn't know how to read the situation. The 3 items were snatched by him. He carried 2 buckets on his shoulder with a pole, and a long ladle was placed horizontally on the pole. He smiled and said, Martial Uncle, please. Furong shyly nodded her head. Her 2 small hands held onto the corner of her clothes, turning it over and over without letting go. She led Yu Qianqiu to the outside of the courtyard and walked along the tall wall for a full 10 minutes before stopping. There was a small ditch under the wall that was connected to a small pool in front of them. The yellowish-brown liquid in the pool gave off an unpleasant smell. The thing floating on it was basically something that everyone was familiar with, feces. To put it bluntly, the pool in front of them was a cesspool filled with feces and urine. Yu Qianqiu looked at the cesspool in front of him as if he was struck by lightning. His eyes widened. There was no need to explain. There was no need to explain anything. He understood everything. He was born in the countryside in his previous life. How could he not understand? The scene of farmers working hard and fertilizing crops in his previous life appeared in his mind. Spirit raising grass. Fertilizing spirit raising grass with human feces and urine. Spirit raising grass with human feces and urine. Spirit raising grass with human feces and urine. How could spirit raising grass absorb this? Yu Qianqiu's face first turned pale, then red, then green, then black. He was already showing signs of going berserk. No wonder these 3 things looked familiar at first. They were used for this. Furong, who was at the side, was so scared that she took a few steps back. Yu Qianqiu could be heard shouting with a choked throat, F***ck. Raising bullsh** T spirit raising grass. Ferdinand, you have guts. You want me to carry feces. The things on his shoulder were thrown to the ground. Looking at Yu Qianqiu, whose eyes were red and who was panting, Forong's hands clenched the corner of her clothes tightly. Her delicate knuckles were white, and there were tears at the corner of her eyes. She said with a slightly choked voice, Mr. Yu, you don't have to be angry. This is what I'm doing anyway. You don't have to do it. I won't tell Elder Lon. You can rest at the side. She carefully moved over and slowly squatted down. Her pale little hands picked up the things on the ground and put them away. Chapter 59. Scram. You damned B***tch, what are you swinging your tattered face in front of Lousy for? Ugly freak, I don't want you to be a good person, so go to the side and die for Lousy. Yu Qianqiu's face was filled with rage. With one kick, he sent the bucket that Hibiscus was holding up flying. Once again, he angrily shouted, Scram. The latter was so frightened that she trembled as she stood to the side. Her tattered clothes wrapped around her thin and weak body slightly curled up. On one half of her moving face and the other half of her frightening face, soybean-sized teardrops dripped down, but she didn't dare to cry out loud. This was the first time he had suffered such a great humiliation since he came to this world. In addition, he was indeed a temperamental person. When he wasn't provoked, he was willing to be a tortoise's grandson. But once he was angered, not to mention this pitiful older sister Hibiscus who was only at foundation building stage, in Ongquangsung, he even cursed Wu Baoru, who was at nascent soul stage. Earlier, Yen Shu, who was at core formation stage, was an example. Looking at Hibiscus's tattered face in front of him, the more he looked at it, the more he felt it was disgusting. In his anger, he didn't care about the difference in their cultivation levels, nor did he care about whether or not he could defeat Hibiscus. Instead, step by step, he forced his way over and viciously cursed, Cry, you only know how to cry. What are you crying for? Why don't you take a look at your appearance? Damn yin and yang face, ugly freak. The more you cry, the uglier you look. Go to hell. The pitiful Hibiscus was forced to lean against the wall by him step by step. Hearing him curse her viciously, but he didn't let her cry, she really did force back her tears. Sparkling and translucent tears rolled in her eyes, looking very pitiful. If one looked carefully, they would discover that although Hibiscus's face was disfigured, her eyes were exceptionally bright and beautiful. Although they were covered in tears, there was gentleness and kindness in her pitiful eyes. It was unknown whether she was really stupid, cowardly, or really kind. Based on her cultivation level, beating up Yu Qianqiu was like chopping vegetables, but she meekly accepted it. Just like that, an average-looking man forced an ugly, weak woman into a corner. The two of them stared at each other, one furious, the other delicate and pitiful. After a long time, seeing that Yu Qianqiu's anger seemed to have subsided a little, Hibiscus loosened her hand that was tightly gripping the corner of her clothes and pointed at the manure pit. She said timidly and softly, I'm going to work. If I'm late, I'll make Elder Lon unhappy. Actually, Hibiscus's voice was quite pleasant to listen to. Her voice was thin and neat, and her pearly white teeth moved up and down. Her faint words really had the effect of relieving heat. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Was his voice a little too loud just now? Did the old man in the courtyard hear him? He was a little impulsive. Seeing that he didn't say anything, Hibiscus carefully moved out with her back rubbing against the wall. She picked up the wooden barrel that Yu Qianqiu had kicked far away and carefully put it back. Her eyes occasionally glanced at him, clearly still a little afraid of him. He then took out a white pill from the slanted cloth bag and tossed it into the cesspool. Tossing a pill into the cesspool. Yu Qianqiu seemed to have forgotten that he was still angry and watched curiously. As the pills sank into the cesspool, it instantly reacted and began to bubble. The yellowish-brown substance surged in the pool, making Yu Qianqiu feel disgusted and a little nauseous. He could bear it when the thing in the cesspool was not moving, but when it moved, it was really not something that ordinary people could bear. Although he came from a remote village, that was already a long time ago. On the other hand, Hibiscus calmly stood at the side, there was no abnormality on her face. Yu Qianqiu's nostrils flared. Strange, the smell that was originally in the depths of his memory did not appear. Instead, there was a faint fragrance. It must be the effect of the pill. He wanted to get closer to see what was going on, but no matter how fragrant it was still feces. He was still unwilling to get closer. Hibiscus gently rolled up her worn-out sleeves, revealing two small, sparkling, white, and tender arms. She grabbed a long scoop and began to pour the feces into two wooden barrels. Yu Qianqiu secretly thought that it was a pity that such beautiful hands were used for this. Hibiscus, however, was calm and composed. Once it was filled, Hibiscus inserted the carrying pole between the two barrels. Her slender body gently bent down, and the hard carrying pole landed on her thin and small shoulders. With a slight effort, the two barrels of feces were picked up by this weak woman. Before she left, she glanced at Yu Qianqiu with a lonely gaze, as if she was comforting him. "Don't be angry, just rest here. I'll do it." That gaze, in an instant, Yu Qianqiu felt something in his chest shatter. Is it a broken heart? No, but I feel my heart ache. Strange, what am I feeling heartache for? I'm not familiar with her. Yu Qianqiu asked himself. Hibiscus's thin and weak body swayed forward while carrying the carrying pole. With her cultivation level, carrying such a load was a piece of cake, but looking at her thin and small figure and the two barrels, it seemed incongruous. Were the barrels too big, or was Hibiscus's figure too thin and small? For some reason, as he watched the steady swaying of the carrying pole, Yu Qianqiu felt an inexplicable pain in his heart. Wait! Yu Qianqiu shouted and ran over. Hearing the shout, Hibiscus turned around while carrying the carrying pole. When she saw Yu Qianqiu running over, she was so frightened that she took 2 steps back. The yellow-brown liquid in the barrels immediately swayed and splashed on the ground. Some of it landed on Hibiscus's shoes and the edge of her tattered skirt. Give it to me. Yu Qianqiu expressionlessly reached out his hand towards the carrying pole. No need. Hibiscus's slender body refused while carrying the carrying pole. Give it to me. Yu Qianqiu reached out his hand again. It's dirty. Hibiscus said softly. If you're not afraid of it, why should I be afraid? Quickly give it to me. I'm used to doing it, I'm not afraid of it. Yu Qianqiu's heart tightened again. He exhaled and said, Did you forget Elder Lan's instructions? You don't even listen to Elder Lan anymore. Do you want me to be punished? Speaking of Elder Lan, a trace of fear appeared on Hibiscus's face. She didn't know what to do. Without hesitation, Yu Qianqiu reached out his hand and forcibly placed the carrying pole on his shoulder. He turned his head and said with a smile, You just need to teach me how to do it. Help me hold this and lead the way. As he said this, he handed her the long ladle. Holding the ladle, Hibiscus nodded helplessly. Then, she hurriedly led the way. Yu Qianqiu didn't find the big feces disgusting anymore. He tried his best to control the swaying of the 2 barrels. When the 2 returned to the courtyard, Hibiscus led him to the garden where the spiritual herbs were planted. She shyly taught him how to fertilize the spiritual herbs. She originally wanted to do it herself, but in the end, Yu Qianqiu refused. He only needed her to do it with her mouth. He would take care of everything that had to be done. Yu Qianqiu cooperated with Hibiscus with unprecedented meekness. Wherever hibiscus pointed, he would obediently do it. The other beauties who were taking care of the spiritual herbs in the garden were all shocked. The ugly hibiscus actually found a man to help her. There were a lot of spiritual herbs that needed to be fertilized. The small manure pit outside the wall was simply not enough. Hibiscus led him down the mountain to the place where the female disciples of Wanfen Garden lived. There was a place similar to a public toilet. There were many manure pits. The female cultivator's ability to excrete wasn't weak. Yu Qianqiu almost fainted. He never thought that there would be a day where he would come to the women's toilet to pick the fertilizers offered by women. What made him even more incredulous was that there were many ant-level seniors who actually had to fight over the feces. Fighting over the feces with ants. He couldn't help but sigh. The area of spiritual herbs planted in Wanfen Garden wasn't just big. The fertilizers were in short supply. Although this girl didn't look good and didn't dress well, she was a hard-working ugly girl who loved cleanliness. If it had been Yu Qianqiu, he would have thrown the bucket to the side when he reached the top of the mountain. Anyway, he would have to continue filling the bucket tomorrow. When he returned to the mulberry garden, he found a problem. Yu Qianqiu didn't have a place to stay. Yu Qianqiu, whose anger was about to flare up again, gradually calmed down when he saw Furong's residence. It was the place where he used to raise spirit herbs and other tools. In the room where the miscellaneous items were stored, there was an empty space. 2 wooden boards were placed on top of 2 stools. This was Furong's bed. Looking at this narrow space, he really couldn't understand. In his previous life, it was said that many people couldn't afford to buy a house because of the high housing prices. Could it be that this phenomenon also existed in the cultivation world? This was too unimaginable. However, the other people in Fuxian Island weren't like this. Even Ling Feng and the other 2, who were the worst in the alchemy pavilion, had a small courtyard to live in. There should be a lot of empty rooms in this mulberry garden. This martial Uncle Cho should have a story that he didn't know. Everything showed that she was being abused. In his previous life, it was said that if one didn't have money, one wouldn't be able to buy a house to live in. This place shouldn't be the same if one was ugly. When Furong returned, she seemed to have calmed down. She didn't have the uneasiness she had when she was outside. She calmly told him that she had lived here since she was 5 or 6 years old. She had already lived here for 15 years. She also told Yu Qianqiu that this place was very quiet. Her cultivation talent was quite good. In just a short dozen years, she had reached the late stage of foundation establishment. This was considered rare in the cultivation world. However, could it be that she had offended someone when she was young? Otherwise, she wouldn't have been beaten up like this. This didn't make sense. A 5 or 6-year-old child, who could she offend? Who would bother with a wimpy kid? While Yu Qianqiu was feeling puzzled, Furong had already started to tidy up the room. She squeezed her own bed to the side and dug out a stool and a wooden board from the pile of junk. Then, she laid out a new wooden bed next to her bed. That was the only empty space left. After cleaning up, she dug out a set of tattered bedding and laid it out. Then, she pulled a piece of cloth between the 2 beds. It was a little like the Chu He-han boundary. In the end, she foolishly told him that he could make do with it here. This was how she treated her guests. Looking at her, it seemed that having a bed like this was good enough. Yu Qianqiu really suspected that she had never seen how the other people in Fuxian Island lived. Chapter 61. Everything was good in this world, but it didn't have the variety of entertainment in his previous world. At night, it was even more torturous. Yu Qianqiu had been carrying it for a few years and had slowly gotten used to it. However, Furong's room didn't even have a single light source. He really didn't know how she had survived for so many years. There were a lot of fluorescent stones in the golden bead space. Initially, he wanted to take a few out for illumination, but after thinking about it, he decided against it. The light emitted by the fluorite was already a bit blue. He was afraid that if the light shone on Hibiscus's face, he would be so scared that he wouldn't be able to sleep. Tonight, he climbed up to the roof and counted the stars. He looked at the small dark room under his butt, and then looked at the other places where people lived. They were all brightly lit. It was really enviable, so he sighed and went back to his nest in the dark. He saw that Furong was still sitting cross-legged on the bed, cultivating. Unfortunately, he was restricted by the aura-refining realm and was unable to cultivate. After thinking it over, he felt that he should ask her about the whereabouts of the spiritual herb tonight. With this girl's intelligence, she shouldn't suspect anything. Hiding under the blanket, he took out the jade disc containing the pill formula. He felt that it was still better to be safe than sorry. He had to confirm the spiritual herbs in the pill formula for the foundation establishment pill. He must not make a mistake. Infusing his spiritual sense into the jade plate, Zhang Xian soon found the recipe for the foundation establishment pill. Heart-guarding orchid, diamond fruit, tendon-forging grass, ice spirit seed, gold fusion grass, 100-year ginseng, 100-year lingji, dirt-removing grass, spirit-gathering grass. If he remembered correctly, it was the 9-scented spirit grass. Who would have thought that the 100-year-old ginseng and reishi mushroom could also be considered as spiritual grasses? Only the first 5 species were found in the mulberry garden. Senior Aunt Furong. Yu Qianqiu kept the jade archive and called out to the other end of the tattered curtain. N. Hibiscus also stopped. Does our mulberry garden have 100-year-old ginseng and 100-year-old Ganoderma? Furong asked curiously. No, but these are the ones planted in the forest behind the mulberry garden. Not only are there 100-year ginseng, there are even close to 1,000-year-old ginseng. Some of the ginseng are probably about to turn into spirits. F***ck, there's even the legendary 1,000-year-old ginseng. Yu Qianqiu was excited when he heard that. He sat up and said, there must be a lot. There are quite a few 100-year ones, but only a few 1,000-year ones. I heard that thing is very nutritious. Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, when I have time, I'll get some to eat. Hibiscus chuckled a few times and said, ginseng and Ganoderma are common herbs even in the secular world. You don't need to spend much effort to grow them. Their rarity lies in their age. Usually, those that are over 100 years old can be included in the category of spiritual herbs. For us cultivators, eating ginseng and Ganoderma that are more than 100 years old directly is a waste. Refining them into pills is the best way to consume them. I'm just saying. Yu Qianqiu laughed mischievously and asked, does the mulberry garden have dirt-removing grass and spirit-gathering grass? There's none in the garden. The 2 biggest plots of land outside the garden at the foot of the mountain are planted with dirt-dispelling grass and spirit-gathering grass. Hibiscus paused for a moment, then explained, these 2 kinds of spiritual herbs are necessary for concocting medicinal pills. The dirt-dispelling grass could remove the impurities in the elixir, and the spirit-gathering grass could lock the elixir's spiritual qi and medicinal effects so that they wouldn't leak out. They were spirit herbs that were used in almost all elixirs. They were used in large quantities, so they were the most commonly planted spiritual herbs in the myriad fragrance garden. It turned out that there were spiritual herbs used to concoct foundation-building pills all around, but he didn't find them. It seemed that he had to walk around when he had time. Yu Qianqiu sighed and said, there are so many spiritual herbs in the myriad fragrance garden. You must have spent a lot of effort to collect them. Hibiscus replied, yes. In the outside world, our supporting Immortals Island's disciples have been searching for all kinds of rare and precious spiritual herbs for a long time. After collecting different spiritual herbs, our myriad fragrance garden will cultivate seeds and then plant them in large quantities. For example, our mulberry garden's consecrated Jogu is in charge of all kinds of spiritual herb seeds. As long as it's a spiritual herb in the myriad fragrance garden, she has seeds in her hands. Ma Jogu has seeds of all kinds of spiritual herbs. Hearing this, Yu Qianchou's heart jumped. He swallowed his saliva and asked, since she has so many seeds, why doesn't the mulberry garden have many kinds of spiritual herbs? Hibiscus explained, the mulberry garden is in charge of cultivating seeds of all kinds of spiritual herbs. It's not a place to plant large quantities of spiritual herbs. Only the more precious or rare spiritual herbs are planted in the mulberry garden. Yu Qianchou didn't speak, but his mind was quickly turning. It was really troublesome that the seeds of spiritual herbs were in Ma Jogu's hands. The key was that he didn't know her at all. Not to mention that old woman was at the late stage of crossing tribulation. It would be difficult to get something from her hands. Just thinking about it made his teeth hurt. Chapter 62. Under the hard work of Guan Yu and Chen Feng, large areas of the Golden Pearl were planted with fresh flowers. Looking around, it was like a sea of flowers, and the fragrance of fresh flowers permeated the air. The sea of flowers was surrounded by a forest, and from the bamboo house came the moving sound of a zither. Listening to the zither, the busy Guan Yu and Chen Feng seemed to be enjoying it very much. Standing in the sea of flowers, the white fox's white clothes fluttered. When she heard the sound of the zither, she raised her hand and tucked a strand of hair behind her delicate ear. She turned her head to look in the direction of the bamboo house, and a smile appeared on her beautiful face. For the past year, Yu Qianchou would take time to come to the Golden Pearl every day. Although he came with a smile every time, the white fox could see that he seemed to be hiding some bitterness in his heart. But when facing the three of them, he would always force a smile. In the bamboo pavilion, on the zither platform, the white fox rarely played the 7-string zither, and it became his pastime. Every time he came, he would randomly play for a while. It should be the legendary, playing the zither randomly, and the noise made by his playing made the other three feel unbearable pain. In the end, the white fox could not stand it anymore. Seeing that he was in a bad mood, she did not want to restrain him, so she decided to teach him personally. The white fox was a fox spirit who had played the zither for hundreds of years, and her zither skills were naturally superb. No matter how stupid Yu Qianchou was, it was no problem for him to teach her. Day after day, Yu Qianchou's zither skills could not be said to be as superb as the white fox's, but he could definitely be regarded as a good player. In the past, this was something that Yu Qianchou did not even dare to think about. Who could let him hold a 7-stringed log and practice the zither in peace? This might be the so-called misfortune, may be a blessing in disguise. When Yu Qianchou played all kinds of beautiful songs that the white fox had never heard before, the white fox was secretly surprised at her little brother's musical talent. Unbeknownst to them, in the world that Yu Qianchou lived in, the prosperity of music was not something that this world could compare to. The efficiency of the dissemination of music was something that people in this world did not even dare to think about. Yu Qianchou had listened to it many times, so he had a clear mind. Furthermore, he had learned to play the zither from a good teacher, so he was naturally able to play it with ease. Every time a new song was played, White Fox's eyes would flash with amazement. Guan Yu and Chen Feng, who were busy in the flower bed, looked at each other. Previously, the two of them were already deeply shocked by Yu Qianchou's profound knowledge in zoology and botany. They didn't expect their boss to be so talented in music as well. The two of them had also heard the 2 songs that the white fox had played over and over again, and they already felt that it was unprecedentedly beautiful. However, after Yu Qianchou added the dubbing and music from the 2 songs that he remembered from his previous life, the two of them were intoxicated, and White Fox was dumbfounded. The two of them said something that they did not dare to say in front of the white fox, and that was that their boss was indeed their boss. After learning their master's zither skills, he immediately surpassed their master and played much better than Miss White. There was one time when Yu Qianqiu changed more than 10 songs in more than 2 hours. The style of the songs was not the slightest bit different, but the songs were still very moving. After he left, the white fox stood in the sea of flowers with a pale face and stared in the direction of the bamboo house. She stood there for an entire night, carefully recalling every song. After recalling, her mouth was full of bitterness. She had played the zither for hundreds of years, and she thought that few people could compare with her attainments in zither music. However, she did not expect that she could not compare with her brother, who had only practiced the zither for a year. Who would believe it if she said it? But she believed that Yu Qianqiu, who had taught her step by step, naturally knew that her brother really knew nothing about playing the zither before. Although his zither skills were a little worse, who could compare with his musical sense and attainments in zither music? Yu Qianqiu, who was holding the zither to vent his emotions in the bamboo pavilion, had no idea that he had shocked the three of them during this time. After the song, he also disappeared. He staggered back to the mulberry garden. At the door of the utility room, Furong was waiting for him with a shoulder pole and a dung ladle, guarding 2 buckets of dung, and he was already used to it. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and smiled in surprise. What had he done in the past year? He could not steal the spirit herbs, nor could he get the seeds. He could not even get his sister in the mulberry garden, let alone the plan to get the seeds from Yan Zixia. She had never seen her before. He often carried out the spirit of AQ and comforted himself, "It's not that I'm incompetent, it's just that the people in the cultivation world are too abnormal. If the things were in the hands of ordinary people, I would have gotten them long ago." Although he said so, in fact, he was quite shocked. He had doubts about the ability of his former and current boss. "Martial Uncle Furong, I made you wait for a long time again." Yu Qianqiu took the shoulder pole with a smile, hung the buckets on it, put it on his shoulder, and walked out of the courtyard. Furong said, "No." She followed him with 2 dung ladles, one long and one short. The short one was made by Furong herself, saying that it was convenient to fertilize. These 2 were the most unconventional combination of the mulberry garden. They went to the dung pit outside the wall one after the other, filled it with fertilizer, and carried the pole back. There were more than a dozen spirit herb fields in the mulberry garden. Fertilizing the roots of each spirit herb needed to be watered a little, no more, no less. After all, spirit herbs were not cabbages, so it was a test of experience. A spirit herb field needed about a bucket of fertilizer. Yu Qianqiu had to carry it several times every day, and he basically spent half a day here. "Qing Chao, I heard that the foundation building pills will be issued in 10 days. Yes, Senior Marshal Sister Lulu, I'm so nervous. I'm really afraid that I won't be able to successfully build my foundation." "Don't worry. People like us, who are selected to join the mulberry garden, have good aptitudes in Wanfen garden. We'll definitely succeed in building our foundation on the first try." They were going to issue the foundation building pills. Yu Qianqiu immediately stopped what he was doing, turned his head to look at the 2 young girls who were pulling weeds in the neighboring field, and pricked up his ears to listen. That's true. The disciples selected to join the mulberry garden are all top-notch in Wanfen garden. I don't think I've heard of any seniors in the garden who have succeeded in building their foundation more than twice. And, if we really can't succeed, we'll just wait for another 3 years. We have 3 chances, so there won't be any problems. After the 2 young girls comforted each other, they laughed and changed the topic, and began to talk about who was the most beautiful. Yu Qianqiu was startled. His heart was beating fast from their words, but they didn't say anything. He couldn't help but curse in his heart, "Damn it, it's none of your business whether other people are beautiful or not. Why are all women like this?" After patiently tending to a field, he couldn't hold back anymore. He put down the things in his hands, and with a face full of smiles, he walked towards the spirit herb field next door. Ah! So it's the two beautiful senior martial sisters, Qing Chao and Lu Lu. Yu Qianqiu laughed coquettishly. The two girls, who were squatting and pulling grass, heard him and looked over. When they saw Yu Qianqiu walking over, they both stood up. It seemed like they were familiar with him. Yu Qianqiu, don't come any closer. Qing Chao frowned, and her tone was very unfriendly. No hurry, hee hee. Yu Qianqiu laughed, and said, I just want to ask these two senior martial sisters a few questions. After I'm done, I'll leave immediately. Seeing him continue to walk over, the two girls pinched their noses and took a step back. Lulu shouted, Yu Qianqiu, if you come any closer, we won't be polite anymore. Yu Qianqiu raised his arm and sniffed his sleeve, and said sincerely, I put medicine on it, so it really doesn't stink at all. If you don't believe me, you can smell it. As he said that, he extended his arm towards the two girls. Senior martial sister, let's go. Don't mind him. Qing Chao pulled Lulu and said, and the latter nodded. Just like that, the two girls left with a look of deep hatred. F***ck. Yu Qianqiu sniffed his body again, and after confirming that there was no smell, he said indignantly, didn't the things I picked out by the two of you? Why are you hiding? Damn it. If you're so capable, come and poop. His face twitched, and he showed signs of anger, but when he saw the shining long sword in front of him, he knew that a wise man knew better than to fight when the odds were against him. He could only grit his teeth and retreat. Unable to ask about the foundation building pill, he ran into a wall everywhere and suffered a bellyful of anger. Yu Qianqiu went to the riverside alone and decided to fish to relieve his boredom. He took out the fishing gear he made from under a rock. But strangely, it seemed that his bad mood also affected the mood of the fish in the river. Not a single fish took the bait. As a result, the more he fished, the angrier he became. He retracted the fishing rod and threw it back. Hibiscus said that this river leads to the sea. Since there are people guarding Wanfen Garden, there shouldn't be anyone stopping me from going to the seaside, right? Yu Qianqiu muttered as he looked at the river that stretched between the mountains. Unknowingly, he followed the direction of the river. After walking along the weeds by the river for more than 2 hours, the river in front of him passed through two dark, barren mountains. He could already smell the salty smell in the air. Yu Qianqiu thought to himself, I'm afraid I'm already at the mouth of the sea. Sure enough, when he reached the mountains, he could already hear the sound of waves beating against the shore, mixed with the cries of seabirds. He quickened his pace and passed through the mountains. His eyes suddenly opened up. The river rushed to its end, the sea. The blue sea was surging, and the white sandy beach was smooth and clean as the waves rose and fell. A flock of seagulls flew between the sea and the sky, and the two barren mountains behind him seemed to be where they built their nests. He hadn't seen the sea for a long time. The endless sea was so wide. The scenery in front of him made Yu Qianqiu feel refreshed, and all his troubles were forgotten. Ao. Ao. Yu Qianqiu took off his shoes and socks and rushed forward barefooted, leaving a row of footprints on the flat beach. His cries immediately startled a flock of seagulls on the rocks behind him, and they also echoed his cries. Yu Qianqiu waved his fists at them flying in the air and laughed loudly. However, he didn't notice that a person walked out of a cliff cave behind him and was staring at him. It was none other than Yan Zixia, whom he hadn't seen for more than a year. Like a child, Yu Qianqiu, who was happily playing at the seaside, only stopped after a long time. He stared at the vast sea and opened his arms as if he wanted to embrace the entire sea. Suddenly, he shouted, this scene, should be sung to express our will." With a somersault, he somersaulted out of the seawater and landed on the clean beach, sitting cross-legged. With a wave of his hand, he placed a 7-stringed zither on his knees. Yu Qianqiu brewed a little, and immediately, he let out an unrestrained laugh. A familiar melody sung by Ren Xianqi from his previous life appeared in his mind, just in line with the current situation and mood. Yan Zixia, who was on the cliff cave, stared at the person below and murmured, "It's Yu Qianqiu. Is he going to sing? I've seen the secret report from Hundred Flowers Palace that the world-famous white fox and a dream of mandarin ducks and butterflies were actually created by an unranked disciple of Ong Kuang-tsung. That person seems to be called Yu Qianqiu. I've admired him for a long time, but it's a pity that I can't meet him. I wonder if this Yu Qianqiu is the same Yu Qianqiu. I'll wait and see." After laughing, Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and waved. His fingers made a sound on the zither. His mood was surging, and he unconsciously used his true qi. The sound of the zither pierced through the sound of crashing waves and spread in all directions. His 10 fingers had already skillfully plucked the strings of the zither. Dong! 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 The moving prelude gradually sounded. Hearing this prelude, Yan Zixia's eyes were already a little brighter. Suddenly, Yu Qianqiu burst into another wave of laughter. Accompanied by the sound of the zither, he opened his mouth and sang loudly towards the boundless sea. The blue sea laughs, the surging tides on both sides, floating and sinking with the waves, remembering the present. The heavens laughs, one after another, the heavens know who wins and who loses. The rivers and mountains laugh, the distant misty rain, the waves wash away the mortal world. How many do you know in the secular world? The cool breeze laughs, actually provoking loneliness. The lofty sentiments still remain in the evening. La la la, la la la. The wild voice and the hoarse voice, the wild singing, the lofty sentiments in the song, and the laughter of the common people. Facing the sea, laughing at the world, laughing at the common people, laughing at the sea, laughing at the world, laughing at the common people, everything was in this song. This kind of lofty and unrestrained song was completely different from White Fox and Dream of Mandarin Ducks and Butterflies. When Yan Zixia heard it, even as a woman, her whole body trembled. Was the person in front of her that ordinary-looking little disciple of the alchemy pavilion that she had seen before? The scene of seeing Yu Qianqiu for the first time emerged in her mind. A trace of a smile appeared at the corner of Yan Zixia's mouth. Hundred Flowers Palace's secret report said that Yu Qianqiu doesn't care about fame and fortune, and is willing to hide with the reputation of being a waste. The example in the report is very similar to this Yu Qianqiu in front of me. With such talent, he is actually willing to carry manure and fertilize the mulberry garden day after day. He really is a person with shocking talent who has seen through the affairs of the world. If this Yu Qianqiu isn't the Yu Qianqiu, who else can it be? Is there a second Yu Qianqiu with such talent in the world? I don't believe it. If Yu Qianqiu heard her words, he would definitely hug her thigh and cry bitterly. He would definitely tell her, "I really don't want to carry manure in the mulberry garden. I really don't have a choice. Big sister, please save me." Chapter 64. His 10 fingers skillfully pressed, plucked, swept, plucked and strummed the 7 strings. The sound of the guqin was sometimes impassioned and sometimes more intense. Accompanied by his la-la-la harmonies, it could make one forget all the unhappiness and troubles in one's heart. At this moment, one did not need to be troubled. One only needed to be influenced by him and laugh while facing the sea with him. Even the sea seemed to be influenced by his song and the sound of the guqin. The waves were sometimes turbulent and sometimes calm. The seagulls flying above the sea also increasingly ignored the turbulence of the sea and dared to pass through the surging waves. Yan Zixia's eyes were a little dazed and intoxicated. Suddenly, the sound of the guqin changed. Yu Qianqiu sang again, the sea laughs, the surging tides on both sides, floating and sinking with the waves, remembering today. The heavens laughs, one after another, who wins and who loses, the heavens know. The rivers and mountains laugh, the misty rain is far away, the waves wash away the mortal world, how many do you know? The common people laugh, no longer lonely, the lofty sentiments are still there, laughing foolishly, la 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 la. Yu Qianqiu repeated the song over and over again. His 10 fingers waved freely as if he wanted to vent all the unhappiness of the past year. Fortunately, the white fox was not here. If she knew that she had missed out on such a good song by her brother, she would definitely regret it. The eyes on the cliff stared at the back of the free and unrestrained lofty sentiments, becoming more and more blurred. A strand of longing in her heart, which had been sealed for many years, finally saw the light of day today. It was hooked by the song and wrapped around the back of the figure. It was tightly tied and could not be untied. Many years later, this back was something she could not forget. Yu Qianqiu's unintentional action was really fate. I wonder what the name of this song is. Yan Zixia savored the meaning of the lyrics and murmured, the ocean laughs, the heavens laughs, the rivers and mountains laugh, the breeze laughs, and the common people laugh. You have so many funny things, but who will laugh with me? Floating and sinking with the waves, only remembering today. I remember the present, but can you remember the me of the present? The misty rain is far away, the waves wash away the mortal world, how many do you know? What do you remember? Can you tell me? How dare you provoke loneliness? Who made you miss? Not me. No longer lonely. Do you have someone in your heart? Not me. The lofty sentiments are still there, smiling foolishly. You're quite optimistic, but I'm afraid I can't. She was talking to herself, but she did not know that just a step behind her, Ma Jiugu, who was leaning on her walking stick, was listening with a smile on her face. She was looking at her kindly, and from time to time, she would look at the carefree Yu Qianqiu. Ma Jiugu was also attracted by Yu Qianqiu's zither music and singing. Who told Yu Qianqiu to forget himself for a moment? The more he played, the more excited he became. His xinqi surged all over his body as he played and sang, and his voice traveled far. Then again, Ma Jiugu had to admit that after living for hundreds of years, this was the first time she had heard such a wonderful song. She also had to admit that she had misjudged Yu Qianqiu the first time she saw him. She didn't expect that there was such a great peerless talent hiding in her mulberry garden. What a surprise! It's a pity that such a gifted scholar has to carry feces, but he's a good fit for my Xia to be her husband. Thinking of this, Ma Jiugu thought to herself, Xia don't you want to know the name of that song? Granny will help you figure it out. You don't have to worry that he won't remember you today. Great-grandmother will let him remember you today. Although she was old. She lifted the walking stick in her hand and fiercely poked it on the rock. She shouted in a loud voice, which child is it that doesn't know death and is making a ruckus here? Aren't you afraid that I will take your life? As expected of a consecrator of the supporting immortal island, his cultivation was indeed profound. With just a casual shout, the sound it emitted was able to suppress the sound of the waves and Yu Qianqiu's playing. Yan Zixia was shocked and quickly turned around. When she saw her great-grandmother's angry expression, she couldn't help but turn pale in fright. She thought to herself, when did great-grandmother come? Did she hear what I said just now? Yu Qianqiu was shocked. Why was there someone else here? The sound of the zither came to an abrupt stop. He quickly stored it into his storage pouch and leaped up. He finally noticed the 2 people on the cliff behind him. Ah! Isn't that Ma Jiugu and Yan Zixia? Why are they here? It's over. That old woman seems to be very angry. What should I do? Not many people can withstand the wrath of an old monster like her. Damn it. I'm afraid of birds. If worse comes to worst, I'll leave. It's just a pity for the Foundation establishment pill, but my life is still more important. A series of thoughts flashed in his mind. After analyzing the situation, Yu Qianqiu respectfully bowed and said, "Disciple Yu Qianqiu greets Consecrator Jiugu." Disciple was presumptuous and didn't know that Consecrator Jiugu was here. Otherwise, Disciple would never dare to disturb Consecrator Jiugu. When Yan Zixia heard this, a thought flashed in her mind. Fortunately, you didn't know. Otherwise, would you still come here and sing? Humph. Ma Jiugu snorted with a frosty expression. Her voice echoed on the beach and the cliff for a long time. Yu Qianqiu secretly thought that she was very powerful.